Hello, scholars. I'm going to look at the IXL exercise, use colons and commas to introduce lists, quotations, and appositives. This exercise is really a blend because it includes 3 different topics, so let's take a look at each of these and then let's look at the exercise itself. First, punctuation leading into lists. Take a look at my first sentence. Johnny needed a large box, a video camera, and a small flock of ducks. I've got a list in this sentence, but there's no need to add any extra punctuation leading into it because I don't have any kind of a pause. If you look at sentence 2, though, I do have a pause leading into the list. Johnny needed 3 things: a large box, a video camera, and a small flock of ducks. In this case, my lead-in is a full sentence, right? It's a full independent clause, and you can definitely hear that pause. So that is a perfect place to use a colon. Remember, colons say, there's more, and here's what it is. So in the case of the list, it's saying, there's more, and here's what they are. He needed 3 things, and here's what they are. So your 2 options leading into a list are nothing, no pause, no punctuation, or a colon, again, if you've got that full sentence leading in and then you've got that pause. Next, punctuation leading into quotes. We've got a couple of different ways of embedding quotes. We've talked about dialogue quotes, flow quotes, and colon quotes. In this exercise, you'll either have a dialogue lead-in or you'll have a colon lead-in. Take a look at sentence 1. John tells Abigail, I may think of you softly from time to time, but I'll cut off my hand before I ever reach for you again. Strong words, right? Okay, in this case, my lead-in is a dialogue tag, which is just a variation of so-and-so says. And typically with a dialogue tag, we like to just hook it on with a comma. Take a look at sentence 2, though. John's words to Abigail show that he is determined to end their affair. Okay, that's not a dialogue tag. That's not a variation of so-and-so said. Instead, it's a full sentence, and I've got the sense of, and here's what he said. If you've got a full sentence lead into a quote and you can mentally say the words, and here's what shows that, or here's what his words were, and here's what she says, then that is a great place to use a colon. So in this exercise, your 2 options leading into quotes are a comma, which you're going to do for the dialogue lead-in, any variation of so-and-so says, or a colon, which you'll do for a full sentence lead-in. Finally, we've got appositives in this exercise. An appositive, remember, it's a noun or a noun phrase that just renames another noun. So if I say Susie, a former hand model, always uses lotion. A former hand model is an appositive phrase that just renames or gives more information about Susie. Now with appositives, I can hook them, I can stick them in the middle, and I'll usually set them off with pair punctuation. Well, it depends whether they're essential or non-essential. But if it's like non-essential extra information that it's nice to know, but your sentence doesn't absolutely need it to make sense, then you'll set it off with paired commas, paired punctuation. Okay, I could take that same appositive phrase, I could swing it to the beginning, set it off with a comma. A former hand model, Susie always uses lotion. Or I could swing it to the end of the sentence, depending on the construction of the sentence. Our best customer is Susie, a former hand model. Now, sometimes you might have information like in a positive that's sort of super necessary for that sentence, and you want to give it a little bit of emphasis, and you've got that sense of, and here's what it is, or and here's who she is. Well, in that case, a colon makes a lot of sense. So typically, again, with non-essential appositives, we'll just set them off with commas. But if you can say, and here's who it is, or and here's what it is, and literally fill those words into the sentence, but in your head. So I guess not really literally, but metaphorically, literally, sort of in your head, whatever, put those words in there. Okay, then a colon works pretty well. Let's go take a look at the exercise now. First sentence. Our planet's first 600 million years, when it was rocked by volcanoes and slammed with asteroids, are referred to as the Hadean. I assume that's how you say that, eon. The name is a reference to Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. Well, I've got a little appositive phrase here. It's just renaming who Hades is. And to me, a comma would make the most sense here. Again, little phrases like this just tack on really nice with commas. Commas are like little staples in the sentence. You just use them to hook something else in there. This full body workout, Joe prefers one activity above all others, jogging. Well, I've got that strong sense of, and here's what it is. I need that information about jogging to complete my thought. This looks like the perfect place to use a colon. Or a dash. But our choices are comma and colon. Let's go with the colon. Michigan State Highway M185 is the only state highway in the U.S. to ban motor vehicles. There are still plenty of legal ways to travel on M185, however, such as bicycling, walking, and riding in horse-drawn carriages. Well, I've got a list, and remember my choices for a list are colon or nothing. And the question is, do we have a pause here? And I don't need a pause leading in, right? Such as bicycling, walking, riding. It doesn't make sense to try and shove a pause in there. Okay, I could also ask myself, is this the end of a complete thought? Is this the end of a complete independent clause? And the answer is no, right? It wouldn't make sense to put a period right here because that's not really the end of that complete thought. So I'm going to leave this without punctuation. Again, no need to try and put a colon in if there's no pause leading into that list. In Memento Mori, photographer Paul Koudenaris explains how the deceased are celebrated in several different countries: Bolivia, Cambodia, Ethiopia, Nepal, and Rwanda. Well, I've got a list, but this time leading into that list, I've got a pause. And it is coming at the end of that complete thought, right? That independent clause. So this is a great place to use a colon. And I can mentally put in the words, and here's what they are. Paul Koudenaris, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, looks Greek and I don't know Greek, explores how the deceased are celebrated in several different countries. And here's what they are. Is it a Greek name? I don't know. Why am I adding this commentary? It doesn't make sense. The Peace Mission, a religious movement now regarded as a precursor to the Civil Rights Movement, was founded in the 1930s by Father Divine, an African-American religious leader. Okay, we've got another appositive, another little thing that just renames who this person is, and those typically tack on really nicely with commas. The U.S. trade embargo on Cuba, which began in 1960, had a crippling effect on Cuban researchers, making it difficult for them to secure equipment, find materials, and learn about research discoveries in other countries. So my list starts right here. The question is, do I need a pause there? And to me, it sounds perfectly good without the pause. I also recognize that, again, this is not like the end of a complete thought, so trying to put punctuation there doesn't make sense. I'm just going to leave it as is. The 2015 Future is Here festival featured a hoverboard, a skateboard that hovers an inch off the ground. One attendee described his test drive in these words. Let me read that again with better emphasis. One attendee described his test drive in these words. It felt like floating on water, that same buoyancy, but in the air. Okay, so I'm moving into a quotation here. If it's a variation of so-and-so says, I want the comma. If it's a full sentence, I want the colon. I'm going to go ahead and put the colon here, and I should be able to mentally put the words in, and here's what he said. So one attendee described his test drive in these words. And here's what he said. It felt like floating on water, that same buoyancy, but in the air. I think a colon's going to work right here. Throughout history, dyes were created from various natural materials: leaves, berries, bark, mollusks, and insects. Okay, another list here, and again, your choices with the list are nothing or colon. In this case, I definitely need that pause there. And it is coming at the end of that complete thought, so this is a really good place for a colon, and you can mentally put in the words, and here's what they are, or what they were. On a hill in Athens, Georgia, sits the world's only known land-owning plant, the tree that owns itself. The tree was deeded ownership of itself and the land around its trunk during the early 1800s. I think I'm going to go ahead and put a colon in here. I think the colon gives just a little bit of emphasis here. The world's only known land-owning plant, and here's what it is, the tree that owns itself. Now, I suppose you could also use a comma, but I think a colon is going to work a little better here. Many famous authors disliked other authors' work. For example, Mark Twain once said of Henry James, "Once you put one of his books down, you simply can't pick it up again." Okay, now we've got a variation of so-and-so said, so I'm thinking comma. Again, in the real world of writing, could you get away with the colon here? I'm sure you could, but I think a comma would be a little bit more typical. Again, it's just a variation of so-and-so said. How strongly people detect bitter flavors is determined by a single gene, TAS2R38. Well, this looks like a great place for a colon to me. I can say, and here's what it is. Some jumping spiders' eyes have filters that allow them to see bright reds and oranges. Says evolutionary biologist Nate Morehouse. In principle, they can see an even broader spectrum of colors than we can. Huh. I'm trying to imagine what life looks like to a spider, but I guess I never really considered it before. Okay, I've got a variation of so-and-so says. Looks like a good comma lead-in, like that good dialogue lead-in there. Traditionally, the Secret Service code names given to members of the same family all begin with the same letter. For instance, the Nixons received the following code names: Searchlight, Starlight, Sugarfoot, Seminole, and Sunbonnet. Okay, I've got a list. Leading into that list, I've got a pause. It's coming at the end of a complete thought, or, well, at least grammatically a complete thought. So a colon makes sense here, and I can mentally put in the words, and here's what they were. Jasmine's grandfather's collected thousands of recipes over his lifetime. When asked how he keeps them all organized without a computer, he quipped, "I do it the old-fashioned way, a shoebox filled with index cards." Okay, he quipped is basically he said. For some reason, IXL really likes quipped. I don't know why that is, but let's go ahead and use a comma. After several days of indecision, Katie finally gave her new curly-haired dog the perfect name: Ripple. Now, in my head, I was saying, and here's what it is. And since I can do that, I think a colon is going to work nicely here. When asked whether his experience as a track and field athlete influenced his development as a writer, Nicholas Sparks responded with the following: "Running probably taught me more about writing than anything else that I've done." I think that's a really interesting line. I wonder why I said that. Okay, this is not a variation of so-and-so said. I've got that full sentence. Nicholas Sparks responded with the following. Great place for a colon. And I can mentally put in the words, and here's what he said, or and here's what it was. Let's do, I don't know, one more. Many people object to eating kangaroo meat. But there are some environmental benefits to its consumption. An article in New Scientist states, one kangaroo consumes about a third as much plant material as a sheep, and just 13% of the water. Okay, so I've got a variation of so-and-so states. I'd like to use a comma. Again, that's just that dialogue lead in there. And I think we'll stop right here.